What makes you angry? What a great way to start a message, right? What makes you angry? And I'm guessing that all of a sudden you've got all these things firing off in your mind. I got this and I got that. And oh my God. Okay, I asked that question. So now, welcome. I'm glad you're here. This is the Kind Faith message for the weekend. And I'm Jeff. And I hope this message is a blessing to you. As I asked you the question, what makes you angry? Can I ask a second question? What makes God angry? What makes Jesus angry? And interestingly, in the passage that we're going to look at today, there aren't many things that make Jesus angry, where the literal word anger and Jesus are combined. I did a pretty exhaustive search, spent a while on this, and I only found two places. I'm going to share one here today. There may be others. There's better Bible scholars than me, but I only found two. So let's look at the passage and then look at it in light of what makes God angry. Are you ready? Jesus entered the synagogue, and a man was there with a withered hand, and they watched Jesus to see whether he would heal them on the Sabbath so that they might accuse him. You might think that was the thing that made him angry. Listen in. And he said to the man with the withered hand, "Come here." And he said to them, "Is it lawful on the Sabbath to do good or to do harm, to save life or to kill?" But they were silent. And he looked around at them with anger, grieved at their hardness of heart. And he said to the man, "Stretch out your hand." And he stretched it out, and his hand was restored. And the Pharisees went out, immediately held a council with the Herodians against him about how to destroy him. And Jesus withdrew with his disciples to the sea, and a great crowd followed from Jerusalem and Idumea and Galilee and Judea and from beyond the Jordan and around Tyre and Sidon. And when the great crowd heard that all that he was doing, they came to him. And he told his disciples to have the boat ready for him, unless the crowd would crush him. For he had healed many of many diseases. And whenever unclean spirits saw him, they fell down before him and cried out, "You are the Son of God." And he strictly ordered them not to make it known. So there's a cliffhanger in here. I'm not going to talk about it in this message because he says, "Hey, get a boat ready." And we're going to talk about the boat in a minute. Interesting sidelight though. What a weird structure. Why did we talk about the boat and then went on to summarize his ministry that got on before? Can't wait to talk about that next week. But this time we're talking about what makes God angry. What makes Jesus angry in particular. So what made him angry? What made him angry? It wasn't, and I would have thought, at least I would get angry by them putting him to the test, right? There's this test that's being held about Jesus, but that's not the issue. There's potential for doubt here. There's the continual theme of Sabbath keeping, and that could be it, that they're stinking rule followers, and I'm sick of being held to their rules rather than what I just preached about. I'm the fulfillment of all of these rules you've been keeping. You know, all that. That's not it. What makes Jesus angry is their hardness of heart. And it begs the question, how soft is yours? What is the state of your heart? How hard is your heart? I think about this passage, and I read out of the Catholic lectionary, and it's lectionaries are great things. The readings are generally too short, so I read a lot more than they give you in the Catholic lectionary. But what's wonderful about them is they bring you back and back and back to themes in Scripture. And it may not be the theme you need for the day, but you start to identify patterns. And there is a pattern that I noticed when I started reading through the Catholic lectionary around the idea of hardening of hearts. And it's a theme that shows up a lot in the Old Testament. In fact, there are a couple Psalms and there are a couple stories in the book of Exodus around hardening of hearts. And there is a place, a famous place called Meribah, where the people of God complained so much they hardened their heart against God. And so the warning is consistently in the Old Testament, do not harden your hearts as in Meribah. Well, what happened? What caused the hardening of hearts in Meribah? What's caused the hardening of hearts here? Well, let's talk about Meribah first, and let's do a little self-reflection. So here's what happened in Meribah. The people of Israel were wandering in the desert, and God had provided quail, and he had provided manna from heaven, which was this amazing bread that came down in flakes, and they made bread out of it. And it didn't provide them with a water truck that followed them through the desert as they walked. So water became a consistent issue, and it wasn't just them that were walking through the desert. They had animals, they had their work that they needed to do, they had cooking that they needed to do. There was needs for water all over the place, and they came to a point at Meribah where they were out of water, and everybody was desperately parched, at risk of, at least in their minds, dying from a lack of water. Interesting. Did you put that together? They're almost dying from lack, and their hearts are hardened. What's going on there? Well, this sermon is a sermon that I've got to preach to myself, and I'm guessing you have preached it to yourself or need to preach it to yourself pretty consistently over time. My heart is most likely hardened at the moment of my need. My heart is most likely hardened at the moment of my need. That was the great lesson of Meribah. They got so fixated on their need that they couldn't raise their eyes to see how God had provided. They got so fixated on their thirst that they couldn't even gather the energy to look back and realize they had a God who was going to take care of them. It all wasn't lost. But it was the need that hardened their hearts. And I think that's a lot of what happens for my heart hardening. How about yours? Need has hardened my heart in two ways. Way number one, being in need in a way where I didn't feel like God was going to fulfill that need. Yeah, I've lived in that space actually for a bit of time recently, because we've moved away from where we used to be in church, and I'm building a business. And as we build this business, it's got this whole question of, is God going to provide? Is God going to provide? And the needs are right up here. They hadn't been like this for a long time, but here they are. And oh my gosh, the emotion and the insecurity and the wondering and the spinning of the mind and the questions of, how do I make it through? Is God going to provide? What's going to happen next? All of those questions, those are the places where I have a choice in that need to either move toward dependence or move toward despair. At the point of need, I have a choice to move toward dependence or move toward despair. You've probably been there. And despair is heart hardening. It doesn't seem like it at first, right? Because despair is sadness, and it's ache, and it's grief. It doesn't seem like it's hardening of a heart, but there is a seed of bitterness that moves in with despair, and in my despairing, I find my heart hardening. And in that moment of need, if I move toward despair, I move toward a harder heart. I realize in that moment of need, I also have the option to move toward dependence. And I know I'm simplifying this because, let's be honest, despair and dependence kind of are in bed together and move together. But attitudinally, faith-wise, and in terms of my intellect, maybe not emotionally, but in terms of my intellect, I've got a choice all the time in that moment of need to move toward despair or dependence. And the goal, the call, is to move toward dependence. What had happened here with the people of Israel, especially with the Pharisees? We talked about this last week, but the Pharisees believed that it was their faithfulness that brought them back to the promised land. It was the faithfulness that coaxed the favor of God into allowing them to return to Israel. And so need, their moment of need, led to despair, which led to self-dependence in order to coax the favor of God, instead of just leaning into the loving arms of God and depending on him. And I know what I'm saying is a lot easier said than done. I get it. And maybe if you're in the place right now where you're in despair, you need to just pause and fall into God's arms. And do it again tomorrow and maybe tonight, and continue to make it a habit. There's a Psalm 121 says, I lift my eyes up to the mountains. Where does my hope come from? And that is a hugely powerful way to move in a point of decision, to actually lift your eyes up. That's the practical application for this, because the psalmists found themselves in a place of need. They could have lowered their eyes to all that was nipping at their feet and threatening to take them out, but instead they prayed, Lord, I lift my eyes up to you. And so to lift your eyes up above all that is causing despair and to put yourself in a place of dependence, that's powerful. Where in your life are you in a moment of need? And do you see at that point that decision? There may be other decisions. I may be making this too fine hair, but I'm pretty sure that in this passage it becomes pretty clear that that hardness of heart at Meribah was at that point of need. And they moved into despair, which moved them into self-dependence as opposed to delighting and depending on God. That's being hinted at in this passage, the hardening of hearts at Meribah. But not just the hardening of hearts at Meribah. If you look, he looks around at them angry, grieved at their hardness of heart. And he says to them, is it lawful on the Sabbath to do good or to do harm? To do good or to do harm? Oh, I got to go back. Sorry, some of you are like, wait a second, you said there were two things in that previous point. I did, and I almost skipped over. So at the moment of need, hardness of heart can create a despair, and it's a moment of choice from despair to dependence. Also, at the moment of need, I have sometimes hardened my heart with my wealth and fulfilled my own needs so that I didn't need God at all. Have you ever done that? You need transportation, you buy yourself a car. You're hungry, you go to the grocery store. You're frustrated with your friends, you go buy dinner for everybody and get some time together. You solve your own problems. And I'm not saying that all that's bad, but I am saying that self-dependence is the other part of that. At the moment of need, we can not just move to despair, and despair can lead to self-dependence, but we can also just choose self-dependence without despair because we're wealthy. There's nothing to despair of. Why depend on God? I can go buy it. So those are the two options: despair and self-dependence at that moment of need, and hopefully we move to God dependence in that moment of need. Okay, so I backed up. I gave you the two because I knew I would have gotten comments. But Jesus then says, what is it? Is it lawful to do good or to do harm? And he's mad at the hardness of heart. Why? He's mad at the hardness of heart because their hearts and their hard hearts are discouraging good, loving, restorative action. That's the heart of the issue here. Their hard hearts are discouraging good, loyal, restorative action, and he's mad about it. And I see this. Have you been in that place? I've been in that place. When I was first in ministry, I'm glad that God showed me a lot more, but I had a moment. This guy came in, a homeless guy. I had a great office. It was downtown Laguna Beach, a couple blocks from the ocean, fantastic. And my office was right on the corner. So it was the point of contact for every person who kind of saw our church and wanted to talk to somebody. And if the blinds were up and I was looking down Forest Avenue toward the ocean, they could see someone was there. They would come in and talk to me. And it was often somebody who was homeless. And this homeless guy came in, and he was a great guy, and started having conversations with him and was building a relationship. And I'd already had a policy that I didn't give out money. That was my policy then. I never gave out money because I figured, that could be used for drugs or whatever. So I've since changed that policy, but that was my policy then. So he asked for money, and I said no. He asked for money, and I said no. But we were building a relationship, and one day he came in, and I had this. I called it my beach guitar. It was an old Ovation. If you're a guitar person, you know what I'm talking about. And it was hanging on the wall behind my desk. And he came in and he said, hey, I know you don't want to give me money. And, we chatted a little bit. And he said, but could I have that guitar? Because I could at least play on the street corner and people could put money in the guitar case and I could make money. And I'm like, bing, teach a man to fish. Don't give him a fish. And so I'm all excited about giving him the guitar. So I give him the guitar and I'm like, man, I did so good. And I was walking around town with one of my other high school kids that I was discipling at the time. And 2 days later, and there he is on the street corner, no guitar. And I said, hey, where's the guitar? I mean, all of his worldly possessions were with him at that moment. It wasn't like he had a place to store him. And I said, hey, where's the guitar? And he totally stammered, totally caught off guard and went, it got stolen. And I could totally tell. He was lying. He got the guitar for me because he knew somebody else needed it, and he sold it and he got the money. And I was like, that's it. That's it. I'm done. I've been burned too many times. I'm not helping again. And all of a sudden my heart got hardened. The cynicism of the world, it didn't just seep in, it jumped in, stomped around, and threw some elbows. And because I had just decided that you can't really do good anyway, I kind of stopped for a season. My heart got hardened from doing good. Now you can make all sorts of excuses and you were right or whatever, but the truth of the matter was I hardened my heart from doing good to protect my heart. It was essentially selfish. I was mad because I got hurt, I got taken advantage of, I got embarrassed. And so I hardened my heart and I stopped doing good. Is there good you stopped doing because you're mad, embarrassed, hurt? Is there good you've stopped doing because you've come up with a reason for why you're going to get taken advantage of if you do the good? That's the kind of hardness of heart that Jesus is angry about. I had an old Navy SEAL dad. Picture old Navy SEAL, like original Navy SEALs, 1960s, Vietnam War, old tattoos, crusty. Both of his kids were in my youth ministry program, and I came up with this crazy idea that we were going to go down to Mexico and build houses for people who were living basically in cardboard and propped up garage doors in Mexico. And he came to me one day and said, I'm not letting my kids go on that trip with you. And they had plenty of money, so it wasn't about money, and they were key leader kids, so I really wanted them to go. And so I leaned into him and I said, well, why? And he said, it's the same thing as saving the whales. Nobody's going to be able to save enough of them. They're going to go extinct anyway. So just let them. Why slow the process down? I was scared at that moment that he was going to kill me, to be honest. But I get it. I get it. There's all of these reasons that we can think of to not do good. It's too much money. It's wasting our money. But Jesus isn't about the waste here, and he isn't judging that. He's just mad at the hardened hearts that are preventing them from doing good. And I don't want to make Jesus mad. I want to have a soft heart to do good. Don't you? So this is really an opportunity for us to have a heart exam, and you don't need a cardiologist. What's the state of your heart? How hard is it? And what's made it hard? Is it need? Like at Meribah, where you came across a need and the need didn't get met, and so you moved into despair? Or you met the need yourself and you just became self-sustaining and you didn't need God, and that moment of need didn't propel you into dependence? Is that what's hardened your heart? Or is what has hardened your heart just the cynicism that seeps into us from the world, or jumps in and throws elbows? What's hardened your heart? Here's the last question. How do you soften it when you realize it's hard? How do you soften it when you realize it's hard? I wish there was a solution here that's given. And in some ways there kind of is, because this last part of this passage, it summarizes all the things that Jesus was doing and all the work that Jesus was busy about. And perhaps the solution is just to continue to follow Jesus and walk with him. Perhaps that's the beginning of the solution. And then I know it's not in the passage, but I'll tell you what I have experienced as another solution for the softening of my heart, and that is the active worship of my God. Preached a sermon about it on the first weekend of January. That worship is the water that softens the soil of our heart for the growth of the things God wants to do in our lives, and it's true. So if you find yourself with a hard heart, follow Jesus around and worship him. Spend time speaking out loud the praises, singing out loud the praises of your God. I'm so glad you tuned in for this heart exam. I hope your heart isn't hard, but if it is, I pray that you will follow Jesus around, worshiping him, and soften that heart so that he doesn't get angry, and that our hearts will be bent toward doing good, not hardened to prevent good. God bless you, and thanks.